This is episode 68 of the Get in My Garden podcast. I'm Aaron Moskowitz, and today we learn more about Korean natural farming and making indigenous microorganism solutions from Marco Thomas, an urban gardener and natural farmer based in Virginia. His mission is to share with his community and teach them that it is possible to feed a family low-cost, nutritious food off a small piece of urban land. This interview will be published in 2 parts, so subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen from and hear the second half later in this week. Today, Marco discusses the first steps to getting started in natural farming and enriching the land with locally harvested microbes. Follow Marco's work on Instagram at Marco_is_growing to see his amazing garden and projects. Follow this podcast at Get in My Garden. I'm really excited to learn about what you're doing.
Pretty excited, and I appreciate you thinking about me to do the podcast. I like, just spreading a little bit of the knowledge, to the point that I can, and hopefully help some people get into natural farming and not using chemicals.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. So I started out at the farmer's market. I was very involved in selling plants, and then I met all the different people who are interested in aquaponics here in New Mexico, and some of the people who are growing in greenhouses. We have a pretty awesome program locally for aquaponics. And then I learned I just started getting interested in mushrooms and mycology. And then little by little, I kept going back and learning about the soil food web because it came up over and over.
Okay.
So starting with, mycelium running, the book from Paul Stamets, and then from Jeff Lowenfield, his books. And then Elaine Ingham's name just kept coming up over and over. Mm-hmm. So then once I started learning about it, it was just unbelievable. It's so exciting.
Yeah, really fascinating, right?
Totally. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. And I do believe that there's no point in being pessimistic. I think I can only feel optimistic about the future in spite of some of the problems. And as far as ecological problems, I think the soil food web and microbes are going to save the day.
I agree. Yep.
Do you want to tell everybody about how you got started and involved?
So my background, I majored in forestry management in college. I'm 46 now, so this was over 20 years ago. And I've always kind of been into gardening. I've always had a garden. My parents had gardens. So that was always just something I liked doing. Even if I just lived in my college dorm room, I always had at least a house plant or 2 growing. And just as I got older and kind of settled down more, I just took more to, my home garden and growing, food for my family and that kind of thing. And so I've always had like a knowledge of soil microbes and kind of the soil food web before it was necessarily, that was such a popular term. But basically, the natural farming part of it came just because I've grown in all different types of, mediums and ways, and including using bottled nutrients as one point and that kind of thing. But I really could see that wasn't healthy for number one, or good for the environment, number 2.
Mm-hmm. So
just reading, and I kind of stumbled upon, KNF as taught by Cho, and then, YouTube videos and things like that. So it's been about 4 or 5 years now that I've really been fully focused on, microbes and growing indigenous microbes and the soil food web. And like we were talking earlier, it's just one of those things, once you get into it and really understand it, it really opens your eyes and makes you really wonder why you ever even grew with chemicals in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I wanted to share that with people, because I knew that if I was so, excited about it and it was such a revelation for me, that I wanted just others to know about it. And really, it kind of makes you, once you get into it, you kind of get a little upset with, big agriculture and the way they brainwashed us all to think, okay, you have to go buy a bag of fertilizer or chemical to grow your food, And so from there, that's kind of how I got into it. And then kind of my motivation is to just show people that chemicals are not necessary.
So you're feeding your family. Are you also teaching people about it, like formally?
No, I'm not formally teaching. Mainly just I share what I do, on my Instagram. But I'm just now getting involved, like my local farmers market. I just joined the board with them
Mm-hmm.
because there's a big initiative in my city, which is kind of a food desert, if you will. It's a little bit lower income. And so I've been getting involved with, trying to educate the community and also using my urban property that I have as kind of a teaching garden. This is only the second year it's been established, so I can kind of see that continuing to grow and eventually, have groups here and be able to show them kind of firsthand, hands-on, how you can grow good food for a relatively low price.
That's so cool. And where are you located?
I'm in Petersburg, Virginia. It's about
Oh, okay.
about 30 minutes south of Richmond, which is the capital.
Wow. And so what kind of foods are you growing mainly?
So with this being the second year, the first year was just me getting the garden established because it's an urban property, like I said, and I got about a third of an acre. Well, no, about a half an acre.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way I have it set up is I have a back garden and then I have a food section of a food garden, which I have some raised beds. So what I'm doing is here I'm growing the ingredients in the back garden to make my natural farming inputs. So instead of buying, ginger or buying garlic or buying sunchoke or angelica or even tobacco stems, I'm growing all of those items here. And then I'm going to, I use those to make my fertilizer to put on the food that I'm also growing here. But what
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing on this property is making like a complete cycle of where everything that's growing the food on this property is coming from, the ingredients that I grew. So right now I'm growing all those things that I mentioned. And then I also have strawberries growing. I have tomatoes. I have some beans. I have some potatoes, doing a little bit of watermelon. And not a lot of each thing, but just a little bit of each thing just to kind of, touch each of the, kind of food groups.
That's great. And so basically, so you're doing the Korean natural farming method. And so how did you start that as far as, I mean, I think people come to it and I have had some episodes on beginners, I guess, getting started, but still, if somebody says, oh my gosh, I want to do that, what's the first step that they do?
Okay. So the first thing you want to do is you want to just immediately just throw away all your chemical fertilizers. Okay, that's step one, because that's gonna automatically get your mindset focused on, okay, now we're not doing any more chemicals. And then right after that step is to collect your indigenous microorganisms. IMO is the kind of the acronym that's used in natural farming.
Mm-hmm.
And IMO1 is collected in rice. So you use kind of partially cooked rice in a wooden box or wicker basket. And you want to go to an area that's not far from your garden and it's growing really big, strong trees. So what you do is you place your rice in this box or basket, and then you want to go to the forest, dig down a couple inches till you get down into the, the good part of the soil. And basically, you just want to set this box there and kind of covered if it's to keep rain out and bugs. So maybe a porous cloth or even plastic sheet over top if it's going to rain. And you set that out from anywhere from 3 to 5 days, depending on the temperature. And what you'll have in that box after that time period is it looks like fuzzy white, and could be red, could be green, could be blues, all kinds of different little colors and colonies. And now that is your first collection of IMO, indigenous microorganisms. Aaron, I'm like I said, I'm urban, so there's a train coming.
Doesn't bother me at all.
Okay, all right, gotcha. So yeah, that's your first step, is to collect your IMO, and then once you have that rice box and that collection of microbes, you want to add that with equal weight unrefined sugar. And what that does is puts the microbes in a dormant state, and then that is then called IMO2.
That's cool.
Urban farming. Okay, is that too loud, or you want to just wait and let it pass on by?
Oh yeah, I can't hear it anymore.
Okay, so yeah, so that's step one, Aaron. Is first you stop your chemical use and fertilizer use immediately, and then collect your IMO.
Okay, so you get your IMO 1, then you add the unrefined sugar, and you get your IMO 2, and that's the beginning of your what's next for people. Because I think that the idea of it is just new, so for someone who doesn't understand it, they still don't really know what to do.
Yeah, so okay, that's actually when you're first getting into it, that's a really good place to stop for a minute is IMO2, because now you've taken all those nice indigenous microbes that you collected, and now you have them in IMO2, which is shelf stable. All the microbes are dormant. The science behind that is basically when you're adding the sugar, the osmotic pressure of the sugar, the molecules bind with all of the moisture in your IMO. So basically, you're taking a molecule of sugar and tying it to a molecule of moisture. And once every molecule of moisture has been tied up, the microbes, even though this material is wet, the microbes have dried up and gone dormant because the sugar has pulled their moisture out of them. Okay, so now you have a shelf-stable product. And to me, the best thing you can do for your next step is just take that IMO2 at roughly 1 teaspoon per gallon, mix it in, and then start watering that into your soil, into your food beds. And then now you'll get those microbes that you collected, and now you're starting to water those into your soil beds. And what the idea behind that is, okay, if these microbes could grow these huge trees in the forest and no one ever had to fertilize them, you're starting to take that whole concept and put it into your garden. If they can grow these huge trees, then why can't it grow, my tomatoes or my peppers or anything else I have?
That makes sense to me. And do you think that your forestry background had an effect on you becoming super interested in the soil food web and microbes because of the way that trees use them?
Yeah, I think it goes back farther. It goes back to me being an outdoor nature child that was always, picking up animals and being out in the woods and, playing in the undergrowth of bushes. I think that led to the major in forestry, which was kind of the closest thing to being, outdoors. And then so I think the roots are deeper than just where I, studied in college. I think they go before that.
Gotcha. That's awesome. And so does the same principle apply that you know of in desert areas, or I guess drier places like New Mexico, where I'm located, and Nevada or some place like that where it's very dry? I mean, they may not even have trees.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I have one thing I do is I collect IMO if I'm traveling for work. If I have an opportunity, I will go and collect IMO from different regions around wherever I'm at. Okay. And another thing I do is I trade IMO2 collections with people. So I'll send them some that I have from Virginia, and they'll send me some from where they live. Well, I have a friend that lives in a desert part of California, which is kind of the environment that you just referred to where you live.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I kept pushing him. I said, hey, I want you to collect some IMO. And, well, I don't have forests here. I don't have trees. And I said, okay, well, then now you have to change your mindset. Okay, where do you have thick undergrowth or whatever your closest thing to trees are? and bushes, shrubs, whatever that may be, where's there a high density of that, where there's obviously self-supporting and the high density of plant material. So he actually went, and I think it was a stand of kind of mesquite trees and those different low shrub areas you guys have out there. Yeah, so he actually waited, and I told him, just the next time you guys get a rain, I want you to set the box out there. So he went out, set his box out, and I actually had an interesting looking collection. And it really, he was surprised. I wasn't surprised. I knew there had to be microbes there. So he got a pretty good collection. And so he was able to start collecting via IMO too as well. And one of the cool things about that is we traded some off. And, some people say, well, what are those desert microbes going to do for you, in Virginia? So if you think about it, if I get this collection of microbes, and it was just a small jar of it, but there's millions and millions of microbes in there, right? Mm-hmm. So when I take those and I water them into my soil in Virginia, sure, a lot of them won't survive because they're like, hey, this isn't the desert, this isn't my deal. But there's always going to be microbes that do survive. And the ones that survive now, I have the benefit of having that desert strength and drought resistance. But since they also survived here, they can take the heat and humidity that we have in Virginia. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, that's one reason I always encourage people to, trade collections. Start with your own as your base, but it's always good to add that diversity in because there's always going to be microbes that survive.
That is so cool. Yeah, I was always wondering about that because I've read mixed things about taking it from, the forest, like if you go way out into the forest. What do you think about that, by the way? People who were to take their first batch right out of the forest someplace, is that prone to parasites or is that totally safe?
No, that's totally safe. You have to, and remember, we were always, coming up, we were trained to know that, okay, look at that green mold, that's bad, or look at that mold, that's bad. So, we always were taught that all molds and anything growing or growth or fungi or anything like that was bad. So one of the principles with natural farming is good and bad are the same. And another part of that is you can never separate microbes into good and bad. So the point being is don't be afraid of thinking that you're going to get a pathogen or things like that, because as long as that forest is healthy, then the things in that soil are balanced. There's, as there's probably anthrax. There's all kinds of things that if on their own are bad. However, while they're in that soil food web and everything's in balance, that becomes good.
Thanks for listening. I hope you get inspired and excited about microbes and the potential of natural farming methods. Check back this week for the second part of my interview with Marco Thomas. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen from and leave positive reviews if you want to support the show.